Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out or sitting in for the Pecan update via Zoom this morning. I'm Joshua Dawson, I'm the Lowndes County Extension Agent with Fort Valley State. And today's presenter is Andrew Sawyer. He's the area Pecan agent for Southeast Georgia with the University of Georgia Extension. Without further ado, Andrew, if you want to start sharing your slides and we'll.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate y'all for having me on and letting me do this. I was, for those listening in, I was county agent over with you guys in Thomas County for 6 years and moved to Wilcox, and now working in the Southeast District to kind of support Dr. Wells and with Pecans over here, working with agents and growers. And so it's a good opportunity to do a mid-season update. There's a good number of things we can talk about. And all right, hold on. If I share it, if I push, it ain't letting me go to the next slide.
Are you using on the arrow buttons and still not letting you go?
Yeah, I was using the arrows. Do I need to use my, hold on. Jeez Louise.
This is PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, and I'm in PowerPoint.
Click with your left button on the mouse and let's see if it moves automatically. Then.
There it is. Okay.
Okay, that can work.
So I can't go back probably. There it went. All right, so what you got to do is click the mouse first and then you can use the arrows. So a lot of what I work with is young trees. So I want to start with young trees and show y'all some things that are probably some issues. A lot of them is bug related. Okay, so the first thing here I want to touch base on, I don't know if y'all can see my arrow, I'll be able to point at some stuff, but first thing let's touch base on real quick is Asian Ambrosia beetle. Okay, so this beetle really affects young trees. More particular, the younger, the more likely they're going to be affected. This beetle has been here since probably the 70s. So it came in back years ago. And the reason we do know stuff about insecticide efficacy and stuff on the Asian Ambrosia beetle is because this thing wreaks havoc in the ornamental world. Okay, so one thing that's cool in my picture right here, that top picture, that's a log of a pecan branch. And that hole right there is an exit hole of this beetle. And actually where my arrow's touching, if you can see it, that's actual beetle right there. They are very small. They live all out in the woods. And so what they do is they read a pheromone, and the pheromone is given off by the tree. And it's actually ethanol or ethylene really is the pheromone. And what they're reading that pheromone, a tree gives that off when they're under stress. And so the reason they're prominent on young trees, particularly first-year trees, is because those trees are under pure stress from being taken out of the ground, dug up, shipped, and then put back in a hole. The roots are cut and the stem is cut. And so, we talk about things like water your trees and fertilize them and all. Yes, we got to do that. But bottom line, your first year tree is more vulnerable to this. So years ago, back in 2015-16, attacks from Asian Ambrosia beetle were really high. We'd see like 10% of tree loss. And there's a way to do traps. So that's what this is right here. And what we did this year was we looked at some different types, not necessarily different types, but there was some idea years ago that painting the base of the tree would stop the beetle. And we looked at that a few years ago and could see that the beetle would go straight into the paint. But this year was the first time Dr. Angel Sebes, our entomologist, we got together and she really designed a really good project where we could really, randomize and standardize everything. And so what you see in the bottom picture is all the treatments that we had. But what many growers are doing is mixing insecticide in the paint and putting it on the base of the tree, and to see how much, you know, this stopped the beetle. This has never been tested, so we want to look at it. And so bottom line, this is pretty cool. What you see here is we have these are all logs that are cut from pecan trees, but basically some of them, let's see if I remember, the pink on the far left, the red was just painted, and the blue was sprayed with insecticide, a pyrethroid, once a week, so every 7 days. And the white in the middle is control. The green, that is the paint and insecticide mix. And we highly standardize that. So we would paint it and then spray the insecticide right after. And the pink over there, I didn't have it in my picture, but that's a herbicide guard was on those. And so at the end of the season, we really didn't have as many ambrosia beetle hits, at least in my area. And where I had this set up was in Dodge County. But Angel had hers set up in Cook County, so closer to y'all. She had significantly more hits. What we do see is as you move east, we probably have a little bit less hits. That's always been typical. But Waycross this year had probably as many hits in the east as anybody. We have 2 peaks. So the whole point in setting up these traps is to decide or determine when the female adult beetle is flying. And once they start flying where y'all are down in Valdosta, usually that's going to be late February. And where I was in Thomasville is the same thing. But up as you move up north, it'll be a little bit after. So bottom line, the whole point in setting the traps, and you see in the top those little stoppers, we actually pour ethanol, denatured alcohol in there, and that's what attracts the beetles to them. And so they're set along the wood line, and this is recommended for everybody to do for trees that are 1 to about 4 years old at least. So again, the younger the tree, the more likely they are to be stressed. So what we have found was anything that was sprayed with a pyrethroid or painted with the pyrethroid actually did have statistically difference. And so wanted just to show that, and we'll talk about that more next year as Angel continues to put all this together. But overall, we didn't probably have the biggest year with the beetles, and this is probably the 2nd or 3rd year in a row. But if you plant trees, you absolutely need to have some kind of trap set out there. You can be 75, 100 yards apart down a wooded line. You got to know when these beetles start flying. And once they start flying, then you can check some trees. Generally, they don't go much more than 4 rows in, but they can go in far. But spraying, and we're going to talk more about, you know, a good way to mix up in the paint. But we are seeing that that's the difference. But where the herbicide guard, you know, they just don't do nothing to stop them. And if anything, it's hard to look down in there to see if you got them. But the signs are those little toothpicks. So that female beetle adult, she's actually boring in there. She feeds off of a fungus on her exoskeleton, and then she's kicking all that dust out behind her. So if it's raining or it's humid, a lot of times you might not see that toothpick. And as you can see in my other picture, this is an actual trap, and I'm counting the hits on there, but there's not really frass or a toothpick. So sometimes it can kind of be hard to see those signs, but that's the bottom line. So what do you need to know about ambrosia beetle? You plant trees, especially first year, you need to have some kind of traps out. And these are pecan logs. We were trying to standardize this, but you can use like a cherry tree or other kind of logs like that. Just find out in the woods. You can see how much to cut them right here. Take a 1/2-inch drill bit, drill in the top, get denatured alcohol, something with the ethanol in there. That's what they're coming after, and determine that first flight of those adult females. So generally they fly February to March, and then we actually have another flight late April to May. And we actually saw some hits again. These traps were all taken down, but other growers talked to us, and they had some major hits come probably mid-April this year. So you generally have 2 different flights, but all this does is tell you when they're flying. Then we have to go in and treat. And so anyway, here's the next biggest bug thing. That was a bad problem last year, and I don't know if it was an equal problem this year, but this is pecan budmoth. And so on young trees, this is where you're going to see it. and it's going to be a problem. And it's a predictable pest, pretty much. So now, this is my first full year. When I started last year, this was everything. But all these pictures here are from this year. And so basically what you have is when the spring comes, buds start breaking, okay? This moth lays the egg, and on the stem around these buds, and then the egg hatches, and a little caterpillar comes out, and it immediately starts feeding on, and if you look at the picture at the top right, it starts feeding on that developing bud, and as the leaf comes out, same thing, and it stays in that caterpillar stage for 2 weeks. But as it grows, it starts kind of rolling. It goes through a period where it kind of rolls up the leaves or makes web, and that's where it gets hard to control. And once it gets that far, it burrows into the stem. So if you look at this picture on the bottom right, it's from the tree on the left. Notice how big this tree is. The picture on the top right is a first-year planted tree. That's usually where it hurts us the most, because the trees there's just not much to them. So it doesn't take much to cause a problem. But the way you know that this is bud moth is you actually look, and I don't know if you can see it in my picture, but in between those stems and those dead little twigs, you'll see webbing. And y'all, when the buds are breaking on that stick that you plant, you can actually, right when they're breaking, you can see the web running from one bud to another. And if you see that, that's bud moth. So basically, the best thing you can either spray early as it bud breaks, or just wait until you start seeing those webs, but it's going to be early. This year, the first week of April started that generation. So the bud moth has 5 or 6 generations. Down in Valdosta, it can push to 5 or 6. The difference in bud moth and something like caseberry and mature trees is with bud moth, multiple generations cause problems. So that's why staying on this thing is so hard. So we were going to do insecticide treatment this year and look at the difference in the products that we're able to use, and we just weren't able to, but hopefully we can next year. But what we got Dimlin, we got Intrepid or Intrepid Edge, and we got this product called Minecto Pro. And I have a blog on this. I forgot to put it in the slide, but I did a lot of research trying to figure out how long those products lasted. Most of them are going to probably last 2 weeks. That Minecto Pro has systemic activity. So it moves in this leaf, and it likely would go, 3 or 4 weeks. They can't say that on the label. And so what we did was I put together information on many of us county agents work with a Dimlin, with soybeans. So what we know is it doesn't move into new growth. So Dimlin, Intrepid, they're taken in by the leaf, or I think it's Intrepid, it's taken in by the leaf, but it doesn't translocate. Where Dimlin is kind of more contact, and it probably just stays on the leaf. Minecto Pro is taken in and it moves inside the plant. So what you're seeing, the reason I'm showing you these pictures, that picture in the middle, that's a second-year tree. That was actually treated with Dimlin the first or second week of April. And some of those trees, and I don't know if the one in my picture were actually treated twice. So what you see is the tree was treated, but the new growth came out, didn't get in the new growth, and look at that. That's exactly what we're kind of trying not to let happen, is the bud moth is able to get into and bore into that stem right there and affect that terminal. And that's what we really don't want. So you see those leaves kind of flagging like that. And then here down the bottom right, you can kind of see where it bored in. And so, but also I'm going to show you another slide. Bottom line on this, let me just say this. Once the buds break, you go out there, look for some webbing, like on this top right picture is easier to tell. There'll be some webbing in between those branches and those leaves. Once you see that, we need to be on a spray. Intrepid Edge, probably go 2 to 3 weeks. So it does have a different compound in there that helps that out. And but need to be checking trees soon after the spray. What I see is that first generation and the second generation. So we started seeing this damage all over again the first week of May. That was the second generation. And so Those first two, there's just not a lot of buds and leaves on the tree, and they affect it more. But if you really pay attention to an old tree, you'll see this in old trees, but it doesn't hurt. You know, it's just too many leaves for them to affect. So this is a problem on young trees, especially first-year trees. When it started last year, definitely saw some first-year trees that were absolutely killed by this. This in the top right, thankfully, this is their only orchard that got hit, but they had 900 acres planted, and this is probably 70. And this orchard was just hammered. But right behind all those trees in the back, there was the rest of the 900 acres over, you know, a certain number of area or whatever. They had no damage whatsoever. And these were not treated. That top right picture was not sprayed at all. Okay, now, here's something I'm learning that I just want to pass on to people. There actually is something else that kind of mimics this bud moth. And some of the stuff I've looked at might be this hickory shoot curculio, okay, which is a weevil. And this picture on the left I got from Northern Pecan blog. It's Dr. William Reed, and he's now retired pecan extension scientist in Kansas. And he has good things written on this. The hickory shoot curculio is just a random, we don't see it like, it's not like bud moth was predictable, but we're going to see it in every year a little bit in the orchard. And the difference is, and Dr. Hudson showed me this, is my picture on the right. You can see how long that tunnel is. The hickory shoot curculio, you see the picture on the left, that's a little larva. He's going to tunnel further into that stem than the bud moth. And once they get in there, there's no killing it. And all the literature you read on this where they've looked at it, I mean, there's really, in the South at least, we just don't have enough to be predictable here that you would really do anything about. So this is what you need to care about as a bud moth. But you see it has a lot of the similarities. So I think a lot of what I've been seeing lately has been this shoot curculio random hits where somebody sends me a picture or something like that. But you just don't see it tearing up the tree, you know, like you would bud moth can. So that's what we need to know about bud moth. Pretty much going to be once bud break starts, 1 year tree, 2 year tree. I would still treat and look at a 3 and 4 year old tree, but especially those young ones. Okay. So something that if you plant pecan trees and young trees, you're not going to get away without seeing one of these 3 pictures right here. What I've done is trying to put together little photos to try to understand the difference. And one thing that's hard with young trees is a lot of times all of this is going on at one time. So how do you really distinguish it? Well, you just have to look at the picture and say, well, it's a little bit of everything. But I'm going to start with mouse here on the left is a nickel deficiency. Okay, so nickel is required by pecan trees, but we get it from the soil, and it just competes with so many other nutrients. So once we start fertilizing, this can happen, but it is site specific. Okay, so it's not like it's a cultivar problem or it's this or that. You will plant pecan trees and you may not ever see this rounded leaves. Okay, that rounded leaf, and you see a little burn on the tip. That is classic mouse ear, which is a nickel deficiency. But there's some sites you just never see it. But then on the other side, last year, 4 year old, you know, I thought the trees would be well out of this. You usually see it on really young trees. They had horrible nickel deficiency. And the leaves are actually dying on the outer edges. So when this shows up, we need to apply nickel foliar. And I got a slide on that next. But let me hold off on that. Let me just show you the difference. The other thing that you're going to see is this zinc. And my picture that I use is probably not the most perfect zinc picture. There could be other nutrient issues there. But what you're going to see with zinc is you're going to see wavy leaf edges. So zinc has a direct impact on the economic production of pecan. But for a young tree, it matters with leaf expansion and leaf coming out and stuff like that. And so for young trees, what we can't forget is to apply zinc to the soil and start building the zinc. So 1 to 3 pounds of zinc sulfate per year is what we need. And now that's not going to probably take that up Yeah, it actually takes time to build, but zinc competes with everything too. And as a micronutrient, we need a pH of 6, close to 6.5 on pecan. Any of these micronutrients, they are more available as the pH is less, like lower. And so as we lime, it also hurts our ability to take up zinc. So that's why we need to put out more and more and more. But the last one you see that is oftentimes in this mix is injury from glyphosate, Roundup. And the difference, and I got a picture of this next, is basically a strapped leaf. So you take that leaf and you just pull it straight out. And what I've learned with the glyphosate is more common than we think it is. And so oftentimes on a first-year tree, it's better to use glufosinate. Glyphosate is really, really good for controlling grass. And we cannot let grass grow around our young trees. So it's got to be controlled. But for the first 5 years of that tree, the bark is just not established. I mean, anything that touches any glyphosate that translocates in the tree, it touches that bark, it's going to pull in there. Oftentimes the tree survives it, really. I mean, this is a pretty hard hit right here. So I've not followed up to ask what happened to those. But you're going to see it on a 4-year-old tree too. It'll be like on a branch, but that's the difference. So the biggest difference right here is that picture. Glyphosate is going to be an elongated strapped leaf, where zinc is going to have those waves. If it doesn't have the waves, it ain't zinc. And then nickel is going to straight up be just a rounded leaf. Okay. So for nickel, 1.5 pints per acre. And when you mix this in your sprayer, you just mix it up as if you're spraying 100 gallons an acre. And you don't want to spray any of this stuff until it's running off the plant. Just spray it until you get it on there, full coverage. So zinc, we used to have how much to put, quart per acre, but do check the label because so many of them are different. But one thing I'm trying to get people to remember is apply the zinc sulfate per tree. You might call and say, hey, they didn't got zinc sulfate, they have another zinc. Most of everything that I've seen is about 35% zinc. So just follow the same rate on whatever it is. So for glyphosate, all we could really do is just keep it from being stressed. Most time they grow out of it. But bottom line, people say, no, I haven't, or I sprayed it, but I was far from my trees. It has injury on there a lot more than we realize. So if you send that picture to somebody and they say it's what it is, it probably actually is what I've learned from doing this, But right now, what we're going to see more than anything is a picture like this. The tree just don't look great. It's having trouble leafing out a little bit. And this is the time where these trees planted this year, they're still trying to grow roots. So remember, the first 3 years, the tree is pretty much just growing roots. And that's why, we probably don't want to over-fertilize. It's not about the nitrogen now. It's really about the root growth. At the same time, you see how yellow this is? This is common, and it really does just need a little fertilizer. And so you're going to see spots and random things on the tree right now that just don't matter. But it's just the tree is under stress. It's trying to get going, So that's the biggest thing you can do for fertility is just follow this right here. When you do a soil test for a young tree, it's really just more for pH. Follow this program right here for young trees. So the first year, if the tree is growing and it's looking healthy, go ahead and put out some fertilizer right now. 1/2 pound to 1 pound. Don't concentrate it. Stand at the base of the tree, and then just kind of shake it around that point. Okay. Then, if your tree is not growing good, if a tree is not leafing out right now, that's also common. Okay. You've planted, the buds are trying to grow, they're just not leafing out. Don't fertilize them. If you cut high when you plant, when I say high, I'm talking head high, 5 feet and over, and it's not leafing out good, come back and cut it down to 4.5 feet or lower. That's all it is just stress at this time. And so when planting a tree, it's best to just cut at chest high about 4.5 feet all the way through. So if you plant a tree that's shorter and you say, well, I'm trying to stick to that 1/3, 1/4 thing. Well, if you plant a tree that's shorter, it's going to be about 1/3. But the taller the tree out of the nursery, the further back it needs to be cut back because of the stress. Remember, years ago, we weren't pruning roots. The research now shows that root pruning is good. And Lenny's even said 3 to 4 inches on root pruning. I usually cut them about 12 inches off. But that's also stressful for the tree. But what they know after doing the work on this is the new leaves that are coming out this time are actually coming out more with new root growth. So in the old days, we stuff all the roots down in. The new leaves are not as getting much from the old roots than they are new roots coming on. And we also prune that taproot to 2 feet. So that's a lot more stress. If the tree's not coming out good, just cut it back more. But if it ain't growing good, we don't have to fertilize. But if it is growing, and like that former picture right there, I would say these trees are growing, they're looking good, but it's kind of yellowish and looking, so they just do need some fertilizer. So next year, we'll go up to 2 pounds in April and June, and then the year after that, we'll go 2 to 3. And then, let me get this going here. And then look right there at when we get the mouse here, we need to apply nickel. Here's something you need to know about the nickel. Nickel is also stored in the buds. So if we have a bad mouse ear problem, and you might say, well, how often do we spray? Well, every 3 weeks or so, if we got a bad mouse ear problem. So like you would treat now, we treat again almost in a month. But one of the best treatments you can do if you got a real bad mouse ear problem is actually September, October, before the tree goes into dormancy. There is some amount that's stored in the buds at that time, and that's a good spray as well. Zinc, we just kind of continue doing it. So don't forget the soil zinc, and but any of these nickel or zinc needs to apply foliar if the symptoms show up. So zinc is wavy, nickel is round, and glyphosate is strapped. So here's the biggest thing I can tell you on watering young trees. Okay, right now it'd be better if we just were watering every other day and not every day. So for those that we got the micro sprinklers you see in this picture, that's about 100 gallons a week, and they're putting out between 10 and 15 gallons per hour. So it's pretty easy to calculate that. But what we need to do, the biggest thing we need to do is try to let it dry out in between, and that helps those roots to really force them to grow. So every other day on the young trees, unless we get an inch of rain, you can go a few days, which we have had here recently. And y'all, this year compared to last year has been really, really good growing conditions for young trees. So if you remember last May, this time it was 103 degrees and no rain all the way through the month. And saw a lot of trees just crash from that. And also, I didn't get the picture, but Lenny told me, this has been something that's been observed for years, but he's actually finally put out a trial of different planting dates. So he said the difference in growth is clear to see. A tree planted in February versus a tree planted in March. So we can plant in March, but we need a lot of water. But those are the trees that usually have trouble when you go into a drought in May, and why you have to have irrigation on these trees. So I didn't get a picture. I wanted to show y'all a picture, but he was gonna show me that. So anyway, bottom line, that's some young tree stuff that's a big deal right now, or at least that I've kind of been coming across. As we go to older trees, here's what we got. Hey, I don't know, Josh, how to look at questions. Do I need to look at these? Because I was thinking at the end, I definitely would do.
No, you're good. I'm just
good? Okay.
Yeah, as far as
okay. Yeah. And I mean, anybody can ask, I guess, but anyway, here's what we got. So 2020, this was kind of thought that would happen, but there's a large crop set right now. And these are just some pictures I took back in April. And I've just looked at some Oconee and other cultivars that we have more over here the other day that I didn't put up there. But bottom line, looks like pretty good pollination. So in April, even though it seemed cool, it was only like 1 degree cooler than last year. And it seemed like it was odd for pollination, but it actually ended up being a good pollination. So heat and humidity do affect pollination. Obviously, when we're hot, humid, that can affect, I guess, pollination in general, or maybe the release of pollen. But when we're dry, the flowers can actually dry out too. And so when we're above 85 degrees, that can affect pollen shed. So when you look back, and likely much of this crop that we're looking at right here was pollinated mostly in April. In May this year, we're 7 degrees cooler than last year, which is a big difference. So April was actually much the same, but the reason it was good is because when we had rain, it came and then it stopped, and then kind of dried back out. And so temperature-wise, we weren't hot and humid. We kind of were right in the middle, and that's where we need to be. And so no known pollination issues right now. And so when you have a hurricane, like we had Hurricane Michael, what they have seen in the past is, it affects the crop. Well, wipes off all the nuts that year, affects the crop the following year, okay? And then the year after that, or from your view, I should probably go here and then here. Then the second year after tends to be a large crop. So a lot of the reason for that is how the pecan sets this crop. So the tree is going to set that female flower or determine what it's going to be in about August of that year. So when you have leaf defoliation, even in September, it still can affect that, the return crop. And some of that may be there's signals that the tree gives, but also your carbohydrate storage has a part in like alternate. So bottom line, we kind of were thinking it was kind of expected to have a big 2020 crop, and that's what we have right now. And so pretty much all cultivars too. But now you may have some that it didn't set as much because you had a big one last year. So our sales over here in the East, they had a really big year last year. So they still are set well this year, but probably not as much. But most everything is set well. So what does that mean for irrigation? And it looks like I'm locked up. Let me, there it is. So what does that mean as we go forward? Well, the first thing we're probably going to see, and you're going to see it if you got desirables, is going to be our first nut drop. And that first nut drop, desirable just does that. So let them do it. And our first drop, these are 4 physiological nut drops a year. But the first one is really just more from, energy in the flower. It's more for, anything like that says weak flowers. It has to do with energy, fertility, not like you did for a lot, but a lot of it's coming out. The buds that are coming out is from fertilizer or nutrients that it had in the tree already. So again, desirable is going to be the one that's going to shed the most this time of year. It's what makes it so consistent. And so expect that coming up. We're about to enter the nut sizing period, pretty much. We're there. And then the second and the third and the fourth drop are often not noticed. I mean, they're really not even noticed that much, but all of them have something to do with some kind of pollination, basically. So it can be self-pollination being a problem that year, or just whatever. You can see something happens with the development of the embryo or endosperm inside, but it all comes back to some kind of pollination issue. And but you obviously don't even notice that. So that's going to be the next thing that's going to happen, and we're going to see it on Stewart. It's already seeing some now. There has been some leaf, I said Stewart, desirable. There has been some leaf drop on desirable that has been noted, and it's likely more from a little bit of, we just went through 2 weeks of no rain after just having a bunch of rain late winter and early spring. And so right now not really seeing any issues related to that. But if you do see that or hear that, that's what it is. So right now we're probably we're at about like 30%. So we're going to jump to, well, you can see in June we need to be about 30%. So basically, with your micro sprinklers, here's what I want to point out in this, and it's not discussed enough when we go to our meetings, but as much as you can water every other day, that's what we need to be doing, just like I mentioned with the young tree. So this time of the year, okay, as much as we maintain this schedule, you know, where we're putting out 30% as we get into June, but for most, it's got the micro sprinklers, it's going to be about 6 hours every other day. But the bottom line I want to tell you is this time of the year, April, May, June, and even into July, as much as we can be every other day, that's good. Okay, so, you know, the zones, if they run 12 hours, obviously, you know, you got another zone you got to run. So once we get up to that, but once we get into August and September, we're going to be every day in full water, full capacity, just running as much as we can and as much as it's going to be. But about 6 hours every other day on these micro sprinklers is about what it's going to be. And so if you get, let's see, we're still probably in that first line where it says 1 inch of rain or more, then you can turn off the system for three days. So everybody's getting some rain, but some people aren't getting as much as others. But still try to be every other day right now, and you're going to up it as we move into June. So just keep up with that. Nutcase bear, this year was first year I think we did this, and I got with Angel back in December, and we tried to lay out a plan, and we had a great thing set up, and obviously the virus kind of got it to where we didn't know if we could do work on the research end of it, but we definitely were able to do a monitoring. And so what we did, what does this kind of, you know, season mean with case bears? We got a big heavy crop on the tree. Well, first thing, let me go through the biology. Pecan nut case bear, this moth comes out. The whole reason we're trapping is to kind of decide when they start laying eggs. I'll get to that in a minute. But unlike the Budmoth, they only got a few generations in a year. And so the eggs are going to be laid kind of around the nutlets there and on the stem. And then that first generation is going to feed directly on that nutlet. You see in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see frass or droppings. And then that nutlet will abort. Okay, so with the nut case bear, the first generation is really the most important. The next two don't really cause as much issues. Now, that being said, why is it, I feel like we're kind of, you know, a little ambiguous with our treatment here in the Southeast versus the West. In the West, the nut case bear causes absolute yield loss. But over here in the East, it's just not consistent being that much of a problem. And it's likely the difference in, you know, the environment. But bottom line, when you have a heavy crop load, this is the kind of year you definitely spraying is not going to be recommended because we have a natural thinning of this crop. So that being said, what Extension recommended this year was definitely to treat the desirables, okay? Why is that? Because they're going to drop so much percent of nuts every year, a high percentage. And so any nut case bear activity can reduce a lot. So, but in all the other crop where there's so many nuts on the tree, there's been times where in the past, 60% damage of case bear on nuts, then we have a higher yield because of that thinning. So, but then there's other cases where case bear have eaten everything up, you know, so it is difficult to really decide exactly what to do. So what we did this year was put out these traps, and we got different county agents looking at them. And the hard part is they have to be checked every day. So once the adults start flying, and when you catch 2 males in a row, then we know it's called biofix, and we know they're going to start laying eggs. So for me over here on this side, let's see, Waycross in Appleton County, where they hit biofix on April 30th. We all started trapping April 1st. And then what happened is a lot of these cooler nights is slowed down all that. So where I had a trap in Dodge County, I never hit Biofix. And then the last I talked to them in Tattnall County, they never hit it there as well. So probably by now we are, but if you look at the day you hit 2 in a row, that's April 30th, you look at 10, probably 14 days after when those eggs are going to start hatching. So that put treating for these normally, which is going to be the normal time, right there in the middle of May. So your Caterpillar materials, Intrepid, Intrepid Edge are the thing to go with. But like I said, I'm almost after the fact on this now, but desirable, treat, everything else, leave alone. Where you got a big crop, okay? So if it was a small crop, yeah, treat that and spray for them there. But bottom line, that's why when you have a big crop, these usually, can help thin out. And so that's what we know here. I like this picture. This is from Angel, and this just shows you kind of where our timeline is. So I've hit on a few things that are early. I do want to show you what does it matter in our mature trees as we get later on into the season. Something that I've learned from seeing and being in the pecans now the whole year is this right here. Aphids, black aphids, which is what this top picture is. I didn't circle it, but see them right there. So you have, in aphids, you have you have black pecan aphid, and then you have yellow aphids. And then with yellow aphids, you actually have 2 species in there, and one is a black margin aphid, and I think the other is just yellow aphid. But the difference is that black pecan aphid is going to be about the hardest one to manage. And so the bottom picture shows you, actually the bottom picture, I should have made it bigger, but what that is, those are black pecan aphids on that leaf, and that's the damage. And black pecan aphids are going to come into the orchard right now or here in a month or so. They can be present in the orchard all year long. Now, yellow aphids are going to come in about the same time, and we tend to see them earlier in the summer. Bottom line, if I give you one of the best pieces of advice for insects, is do not use Lorsban and do not use a pyrethroid in a mature orchard as long as you can at all. Okay, so you might say, well, what about the weevils? Because the pyrethroid is about the best thing we got on it. And so the best thing is when August comes, if you got weevil traps out and they have emerged, okay, and if it's dry, they don't emerge, then you're good. But if they emerge from the soil, you're going to have to use a pyrethroid. And once you use it, you're going to kill all the beneficial bugs. That's what all this stuff does. Lorsban and pyrethroid are going to be broad spectrum. So they're just going to kill every bug out there. What the pecan orchard has is so many wasps and green lacewings and ladybugs that really hold these aphids back. So once you spray Lorsban or some early in the season, you're going to have aphids. And their populations are then going to build to the point where you're actually probably going to have to treat for them. So if you could I would ignore yellow aphids, really, if you could just ignore them through the whole season. Even if you starting to see the sooty mold on the tree, the sooty mold can be a problem because it's going to start covering that leaf and it's not going to take in sunlight. But that glaze appearance on the leaf that's from their honeydew, which is their droppings, we can take a good bit of that before we really see that decline in that, production of that leaf. And last year, the worst I saw it was in July for yellow aphids, okay? And that honeydew just all over the leaves, we still went without treatment. But the longest you can probably make black aphids is maybe into August or September. But if we can get away without having to spray even in July, and that's where not using the Lorsban and not using the pyrethroid can help you push this out. The problem is the black aphid, that species is probably going to be the hardest insect pest to control, and it's simply due to resistance. So we have to rotate. I got a better slide to help you on that rotation. Whatever you used last year, you need to switch and use something else this year. So you might say, well, Andrew, you didn't even say nothing about when to treat for them. Well, you may see that adult in a pecan orchard, it's just going to be solid jet black, and you flip over the leaf and it's going to be under there. You may see them throughout the year, but we really try to hold off on treating until you see, and actually that bottom picture is their immatures, but it's so far away you can't tell. Their immatures are kind of greenish color, like a dark green color, and you know, to the naked eye, or if you have a little hand lens, they look like baby frogs. That's what I call them, and it's an easy way to tell. And once we start seeing those immatures of black aphids, is about when we're going to need to pull the trigger. And you may see them before you start seeing the damage, but once the damage gets like this and it starts shedding leaves, you're going to have a problem, because those kernels are filling up at that time. And if it can't get that energy consistently, that's when it's going to be a problem. So last year, we were able to make it on into August before most people, unless somebody tell me something I didn't know, that we really had to treat for them. But I was seeing them in the orchard throughout the year. So that's so, if you can get away without using Lorsban and pyrethroid. And so Lorsban for caterpillars, but we have other caterpillar, insecticide. But here's a slide from Angel that see these colors, Closer, Carbine, Nexter, PQZ. Each one of them is a different color, and that's a different chemical class. Okay, so mites, Nexter controls mites and aphids. So if we're late as we get pushing into September, and we get mites start to get on the leaves, once you counting like 20 or 50 mites running up a leaf, we're starting to get to where you're going to have to do something. And next year, if black aphids there, would work on both of them. Anyway, a little bit on that, but here's your beneficials. Okay, last year, started the job. One of the first places I went, asked about aphids, said, man, we got aphids. This is the month of May, y'all. Just like, this was actually before now. And I get out there, and these are old trees, and they are white. I mean, they are honeydew all through the leaves. This is in the month of May. Like, we haven't even got into the aphid season yet. And it was yellow aphids and honeydew all over the leaves. And aphids, you flip the leaf over and it's just full of yellow aphids. And I asked what they had treated with, and and sure enough, it was Lorsban. It was a particular Lorsban. And that right there is why we kill all these insects right here that are good. And the one that, if you flip over a leaf in a pecan orchard right now, and you see these, if you got to look close, but you'll see these little eggs coming off the bottom of the leaf, and you got to turn it because your eye will pick it up. But that's a lacewing, and those things are really do some work on aphids. And then the ladybugs too. There's different species of ladybugs. Some are up in the trees, some are down on the ground, and if you got clovers, stay down in there. But there's also wasps that are doing an amazing job. So the biggest thing you can do there is do not use pyrethroid or Lorsban throughout the season, starting now. So what about scab? So far, we have actually had a great start for scab. Those lower temperatures, and we've had, the rain has come all at once, and then it's settled back and got dry. And that has been the best thing for us with scab. And as a matter of fact, even 2 weeks ago, when Dr. Wells and I were talking, he had not seen any himself on desirable. He had heard a few reports, but I went and looked at some desirable over here the other day and still couldn't find any. So many people, as of 2 weeks ago, has gotten away with 2 to 3 sprays. So minus the rain. Now it's been a week, and now we've had a good bit of rain. As much as we can remain stretched on those fungicide and all the cultivars except desirable, bird, canard, moral, some of these newer ones are getting scab as much as desirable. I would be on a 2-week spray with desirable and anything that's high, scab. And you really could about put pony in there. Pony can take some scab. So, but with everything else, as much as we can stay stretched out, that's great. And so once we get to the crop set and the nut size and period, okay, basically our best program moving forward, and this is post-pollination, what you're looking at, this is from Jason Brock, Dr. Brenneman's slides this year at our meetings. You know, 10 anti-last, and are going to be rotated with this new compound I'm going to show you, Miravis Top. It's looked fantastic in the data, and it's going to be the top of the line fungicide control or scab control. And so where we don't use Miravis, we can use a group 3 and a group 11, or like Amistar Top. And the phosphites are okay. Phosphites are really, really good at leaf scab, and that's where their highest benefit is. Okay, so you know, standalone we can use, but once we get scab sitting on the trees, we really, if you use phosphite, it needs to be with something else. But they do us a world of good in the pre-pollination period and in the leaf scab. So from here on out, you know, Miravis Top is going to be really, it's best suited for nut scab. Now, keep in mind, this is not a wait till we get scab real bad and then put out Miravis. It's still going to be used as a protectant, okay? But one of the benefits it brings us is another group, and that's what's so important. There has been other fungicide in group 7, but it never was as effective on nut scab. So we really just didn't use it that much. But so it's not necessarily a first time we've had a group 7, but it is pretty much new in that regard to having a group 7. Now, its ability to get resistant is still medium, probably medium to high, somewhere in there. So it's got to be rotated, and but all the other things that we use are going to be different. So rotate modes of action away from 3 and 7. So far, that difenoconazole, that's a group 3, has not had the cross resistance. Many of our other group 3s do have what's called cross resistance. So if it's resistant to tebuconazole, it'll be resistant to propiconazole as well. You hadn't even sprayed it. But this one doesn't have that, so that's good. But no 2 times in a row, okay? No more than 4 applications a year. They're going to have to be 14 days apart. But if we're rotating, that'll take care of itself. And so that's the kind of the bottom line on Miravis Top right now. Really good on the nut scab. I was asked to mention about prices in the market, and let me say this. You know, right now there's really nothing we can say in terms of where we're headed. It's been tried often, and all the time something changes and it changes. But you know, in terms of export, you know, it's looking like there's just too much we're not going to know right now due to the virus and people not shopping in the stores and stuff like that. But as far as export and the tariffs, it'd be great. I think without the virus, they probably were feeling, you know, pretty good about them coming down. But if they come down, we get a little better price. China's definitely wanting to get back, you know, into our market for sure, and they are the driver of the export. But there's so many other countries that are really, you know, helping us out there. South Korea, Vietnam is big, and so let's see, you know, Mexico, they're really to the point where they're producing more than we are, so that competition is significant. But they grow Wichita, and Wichita does have a problem sometimes with sprouting, and I think they had that issue last year. And so, you know, that's those larger, I guess, higher percentage kernels, and those nuts are really demanded on that shelter market. And so, you know, it is a concern about, you know, some of our traditional Stewarts and Success, Sly, Moneymaker. In terms of Moneymaker and Success, you know, which I don't think we got, there may be some y'all's way, but there's some over here. You know, the prices probably are not really there for it, but Stewart is still on the line, you know. So a year where you got over 50% kernel, and it can make export, you know, it's still, you know, profitable, of course. But those are the biggest changes. But a year where Stewart's under 50, you know, and it's got to go to the shelter, and then, you know, a lot of they got more choice of the larger, closer to 60% kernel. It does hurt us there. And so in there. But anyway, not really able to make a really good prediction about it, and where we're headed on that, on prices or anything like that. But there was a lot of good talk at the Southeastern Pecan Growers meeting this year, February. Again, that was right as the virus was coming out. So still some unknowns there, but that's kind of where we stand, with a lot of things. So trying to think of anything else I can tell y'all. I can open it up for some questions.
If y'all have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or enter into the chat box.
Yeah, and I'll try to look at the chat box. Oh, good question. All right, good question, Jake. Is the second flight as high as the first? Based on what I've seen, I don't know if the second flight of Ambrosia beetles is as high as the first, but in her data that she's collected, Dr. Angel, they look about equal, but I haven't seen the numbers. But I guess in terms of answering the question, they can be as significant in terms of hurtness. And let's say one grower in Ware County, he's about had them as bad as anybody this year, but they had a flight in mid-April and they ended up losing a number of trees there. But that's been the worst I've heard on my side. So, but based on Angel's data, and I've almost put that picture in the chart here or in the PowerPoint, but looking at the line, not the numbers, it can be significant there. I didn't realize I was going far. Sorry about that. That was a whole hour.
That's all right.
But hey, everybody's here, so
Yeah, everybody's still hung in
hopefully
there.
it was helpful.
That was a lot of good information there, Andrew.
Hopefully it was
said,
helpful.
oh yeah. If y'all have any more questions, feel free to contact the local county agent. If you're not in our service area, Lowndes County. If not, give me a call or reach out to Andrew. Andrew, you want to talk about anything about your radio or anything? Just kind of let them know about it.
Yeah, and I don't know how to. Hey, maybe I can pull it up, and I'll tell you when I'm ready. But I got let's see, if y'all want to go on, it's SoundCloud. Let me pull it up. And Josh, if you're able to share the screen, I'll show it to them. But I do a radio program once a month, and you may not hear it on radio. It goes down to Thomasville, but y'all may not hear it from there. But I just got to where I put them on this. Let me see if I do it.
If you got a web link or anything, you can type it in the chat box and
Watch this. See if it comes up.
There you go.
I got it on SoundCloud, and you're welcome to go there and just type in Andrew Sawyer, and May right here, and then you can go back and listen to some former ones. So that's something else that, and honestly, I try to. It's hard for us county agents and extension people try not to double up my work, but a lot of times what I end up doing on radio is so different, and so they end up being kind of an added information. So if you really want to talk about the market, I think the closest thing I got is back in May, talked with Randy Hudson, and they do a lot of time they spend out in other countries and with these export markets. So he's up on about everything there. And that was in May 2020 is the first one on there. And he talked a little bit about COVID as well. And that's probably one of the reasons it's going to be hard kind of seeing what's going to happen in the future. But anyway, there's other things I'm reading that seem to be good. But again, Dr. Wells and I have talked about that. And he said about every time when you think you got it figured out, it kind of changes. So kind of stayed away from really trying to say it's going to be this or going to be that. But that's a good little report there. And there's other ones you can listen to. Welcome to go to that anytime. I send the county agents a newsletter that they can send out to try to put some pictures and stuff together of things I'm seeing. But hope that helps.
All right. Cool. Well, we appreciate it, Andrew. We're gonna go ahead and just end the meeting today, and I'll give you a call here at a little bit here. I got a question to ask you, but thank everybody for coming on today. Hopefully, you had good information here, and hopefully we can even get the recording out to you all soon.
Right. Thanks, Josh and Andrew.
Thanks,
All right.
Jake.
Appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.
See ya.
Yep.